In this episode of Student Led Conversations, we explore the crossroads of pop culture and accounting, how entertainment keeps evolving, but the business side and the accountants behind it remain essential. With movies, music, and soundtracks in the mix, this conversation shows that accounting professionals aren't just number crunchers. They're storytellers, problem solvers, and sometimes even superheroes with spreadsheets.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Student Led Conversations, the podcast where we explore big ideas through student voices. I'm your host, Harshita Multani, and today we're diving into something that mixes fun with finance, pop culture and accounting. From VCRs and summer reruns to today's pop culture streaming overload, entertainment has always reflected how business works behind the scenes. And believe it or not, accounting professionals have been there every step of the way. I'm excited to be joining some great guests who know what it means to balance passion for pop culture with professional expertise. So before we get started, would each of you like to introduce yourselves and share your favorite movie, TV show, or even music artist with our listeners?
Sure. Thank you, Harshita. My name is Armadra Bradley. I am an Indianapolis native, so I'm an Indianapolis girl born and bred. I am a career auditor of a little over 20 years. I am currently the president of the Indianapolis chapter of NABA. And then in my free time, it's me, my fiance, and my dog. So that's me.
I'm Jeff Frabel. I'm a partner with CCK Strategies in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm probably the old guy on this discussion, but I am a pure child of the 80s. I've been in public accounting now for about 30 years. Most of that has been in tax, and I just like to hang out with accountants that have personalities.
And I'm Dave Maresca, and I'm a 20-year video professional, but those 20 years have been spent making media for the accounting profession, working with not only the Center for Accounting Transformation, but for some other organizations before that. So I'm sort of the video guy who's usually behind the scenes for these things. So it's really cool to be on camera and chatting with you all about one of my favorite topics, movies, music, and TV shows. And somehow it all connects to accounting.
And I apologize, Harshita. I just realized none of us followed instructions because you said name our favorite movie, TV show, or artist, and we all just kind of skipped right past that. So kind of circling back to that, it's hard for me to pick a favorite of anything because my tastes are very eclectic. But anything that's a musical, I probably love as it comes to like movies and things like that. And again, TV shows, anything that's uplifting. So positivity is really kind of my bag.
Well, see, that's what happens when you follow someone's lead, Armadra. So I'll jump in here. As far as music goes, like I said, I'm a child of the 80s. I love anything from 76 to about 85 or 86. My favorite movie of all time is probably Back to the Future 1. 2 is a close second, 3 not so much, but Back to the Future is what does it for me. And as far as TV goes, I've really kind of gotten into this binging thing in the last few years, but the coolest thing about binging is you can find all these old shows that are on TV. So right now I'm watching Emergency, which comes out of the 70s. It's a show about firefighters and paramedics, and it comes out of the 70s, and it does not hold up to current times, but it's fun to watch.
I also, like Amadra, have a hard time picking one movie to say as a favorite movie, but I usually in that discussion will say Heat with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. I think that's just an epic film. TV shows, I have to go with Lost. I would be betraying a part of my heart if I didn't say Lost, but I do like some other shows in the age of binging that I've been able to catch up on, like Mr. Robot and Peaky Blinders. And then music, I'm an 80s, 90s guy as well. And my Spotify playlist is crazy. So I can't really just pick one and say that defines me. I'm kind of all over the place.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your favorites. As for me, I would say it's hard for me to pick a favorite TV show as well because I'm always watching all different kinds of genres. But my personal favorite movie as of now is the Cruella movie. It has a similar vibe to The Devil Wears Prada, which is another movie that I really like. But that movie, it mixes a lot of mystery with fashion and a little bit of crime here and there. So I love those kind of movies. As for music, I'm kind of on the same boat as Dave. I do like listening to a little bit of everything. I would say though I'm not a fan of country, but everything else I'm on board with. So, pop culture throughout generations. So, pop culture has changed a lot across generations. Gen X grew up with VCRs and reruns. Zennials streamed and recorded, while Gen Z, which is my generation, we have everything on demand, like binge watching. But no matter what the format is, the business side of anything, whether TV, movies, or music, there's always an accounting side, whether it's royalties, profit and reporting, or helping artists stay financially safe. So, my question for you all is, how have you seen the business model of entertainment evolve over time?
I'll put my 2 cents in. Um, and I think it goes to the same way that the formats are changing, right? Is the business has to follow that. So there was a time if you're an actor, for example, right, the negotiation for your contract for a movie is going to be based on, box office sales and probably home media sales would be my guess, right? Well, now in the era of streaming, one, some stuff doesn't even ever make it to the box office. Right?
Hmm.
You have so much direct content, right, from Apple TV, Netflix, every platform has some sort of only on our platform media. So those contracts can't look the same. And then even if it is something that goes to the box office and then is going to be sold and then is going to be streaming, and we've seen it, we're seeing it, with like the actor strike and the writer strike, because they're saying these old ways of doing things don't benefit us anymore. The companies are able to reap all these benefits for years and years and years off of our work, but we're getting paid this tiny percentage. You see the same thing in music, right? It used to be album sales. Who buys albums anymore? Not many of us, right? We pay for whatever service and you just download it and play it again. So the contracts, the way it has to be accounted for, I would venture to say is probably very different, because you can't just say, well, we made this movie and it cost us $100 million and the box office was 300 million, so bam, profits 200 and that gets split. It's a lot more complex than that.
Harshita, I'll take a slightly different approach with your question and answer
Hmm.
maybe some things that haven't changed in all the years. And so, when we get into these conversations about which is the best tax approach to use, people talk about the flat tax and things like that. And they say, if they do a flat tax, you'll never need CPAs. And I argue, well, that's not the case because people don't know what revenue is. And so
Hmm.
it's the same thing in entertainment. These industries are always going to need somebody that has a financially stable mind. The way I usually explain it is that you do you and I'll do me. That means you do what's going to make you money and use your talents and your gifts for those areas. If you're an actor, if you are a recording artist, what in the heck are you doing thinking about debits and credits? You don't need to be doing that. Let me do that because I can't sing and I can't act, but I can surely make a difference in their life. And we've heard story after story of entertainer being someone taking advantage of them. Either it's an entertainer or a celebrity. And these people just need someone that they can trust and walk with them through their journey. So, in my mind, while contracts may change and revenue streams may change and things of that nature, they're always going to need people like us to take care of them.
Yeah, and I think they're going to need folks who are able to tackle these challenges that Amadra is bringing up about, well, okay, how do we adapt the model so that people would even still want to do this? I mean, if you're going to look at the 80s where your movie made hundreds of millions of dollars and you were contract stipulated you were going to get this percentage of those royalties, well, if that whole process disappears, how are we going to keep the talent wanting to come and do all these amazing shows? I mean, they still do it. So somehow this was figured out. But that's the question I'm usually asking myself when I'm watching all these stars who, for at least 2 decades, were used to commanding these very high salaries, and now they're coming into a completely different playing field, and they're like, well, I usually get 20 million to do something like this. If the platform is not pulling in that much money for this show, how are we going to satisfy what I want my fees? But somehow, I know a lot of the services are a little secretive about how they do those calculations, but rest assured, somewhere there's somebody with at least the CPA after their name helping them figure out how to do it.
Mhm.
I love how all of you guys brought up the fact that there is an accountant that is on that background side, because I do think that's a very important part of it. Because no matter how, like how Amadra said, that there's always going to be different ways, different tactics that we're going to have to evolve as time also goes on. For when it comes to the business side of it, we're going to have to adapt with the different kinds of streaming services and as we evolve to different types of method for streaming. But in the end, there's always going to be that accountant in the background that's going to be behind it all. But I also did want to say, would you guys say that an accountant is just as important as a manager now in this day and age?
I would say probably that's always been the case. To Jeff's
Oh
point,
yeah.
um, whether it's entertainment in the form of, like you said, music, movies, athletes, we hear a lot about athletes who, same thing Jeff was saying about, they get taken advantage of because they don't know. And they shouldn't have to, right? Like they shouldn't have to be a subject matter expert in the debits and credits. Do the thing you're good at. I love that, Jeff. I love you do you and I'll do me. I love that. Um, because that is a critical function. And when you don't have the right person in that position, that's when you wind up in, oh, now you're being charged with tax evasion, Wesley Snipes, or now you're, like you're in a bad situation because you didn't have the right person taking care of your business. At the end of the day, we all work to make money, right? And so, having a good accountant that's handling that piece of it for you when you're making a lot of money is very important.
I could see where you get in these classic struggles internally in various organizations where like sales competes against administration, and I could see where in this kind of situation it's the same thing. You've got the CPA or the accountant going, look, if you can't track your money or take care of your money, what good's it to be popular and make that money? And your manager's going to say, if it's not for me, you won't get the gigs. So there's probably behind the scenes, there's probably a huge struggle that still goes on there.
There's also the fact that sometimes the creative side of our collective society doesn't always want to take the time to appreciate the practicality that comes from the accounting side. And I think when I think of a popular example, it has to be Nicolas Cage, who basically had to take every movie offered to him in the last 10 years because he spent all his money on castles in Europe. And you got to imagine at some point, someone on his team was like, dude, you have two. I don't know if we need to buy a third one, and I really don't know if you can afford to keep the two you have. So even though those professionals are there, there has to be a certain level of understanding from the artist side too, that it's worth listening to what they're telling you, because they're trying to protect you even from yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I love how all of you guys brought up the different industries, like the athletic industry, the artists. Is there any other specific place that we see accountants power these industries? Because there is a certain way that all these accountants play a role, just like how you guys mentioned. Is there any way that they play a role, and why does that matter?
Hmm.
Good question. I think accountants always rule. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like Dave, or like we were saying, it's a matter of working to make money and taking care of your money. And we could talk all day about good ways and bad ways to do it. But the bottom line is we tend to be gifted at that area. And it's a valued gift, especially for someone that can't do that themselves. And again, it's okay. Everyone's got their own gifts, but I think accountants make the world go round.
I can't say it any better than that. I
Mhm.
we're kind of that silent, undercurrent, right?
Mhm.
If the money's not right, nothing moves forward, right? And that's true in government, in the private sector, in entertainment. If that's not right, nothing moves forward. It takes money to make things move. That's just a fact
Mhm.
of life. And so our role is meant to be to protect that, to advise, to strategize, to make sure that things keep moving the way that they should.
I also would have to say probably there's times where they are in an unenvious position of having to bring some reality to the table and say, listen, we have a very small dedicated fan base for this show or this movie, but the fact is we spent more making it than we made releasing it. So they may love it. We may have ended on a cliffhanger, but I don't think we can afford to do a season two. I'm not going to send that email though. That's on you. I'm just bringing you the paperwork that shows this isn't a viable option. And so sometimes we will get that extra, they'll give us an extra season to see if it changes. But, I'm sure that it's a tough call that they have to make, but they also are the ones that are keeping everybody honest with what's happening as far as the dollars and cents are concerned.
There always does have to be that accountant that's going to be, keeping everybody level-headed, or, when there is like passion and all of that, all of those dreams overlapping with your work, it's really easy to be, to get ahead of yourself, to plan ahead. But in the end, there's always going to be that accountant that's going to be like, hey guys, let's lower it down. Let's actually bring this down to what we need to do in order to get there, what we need to make in order to get there, and all of those financial steps that, all of the people that are watching at home, all of the viewers, all of the listeners, all the people that are on the receiving end, they don't see all of those things in the back as well.
Yeah.
And Dave, you did bring up that episodes and seasons. And from that, I did want to shift a little bit onto The Office specifically, because in this episode, we wanted to talk a little bit about what would the office dynamics and the show The Office, all those dynamics, how they would look like in real life. So now let's move on to a couple of more iconic shows and movies. And let's move on to just what we can talk about from there. So, Michael Scott specifically is all about being loved and not feared.
Mhm.
But imagine if he had to stick to a budget, like in real life. And we can already imagine how that would be. Would Dunder Mifflin even survive? He'd probably blow the whole quarterly budget on pizza parties and Dundee trophies. But I would love to see what you guys have to say about The Office and what it would look like in real life.
Okay, the green bar is what you spend every month on stuff you need, like a car and a house. The red bar is what you spend on non-essentials, like magazines, entertainment, right, things like that. This scary black bar is what you spend on things that no one ever needs, like multiple magic sets, professional bass fishing equipment.
How did you do this so fast? Is this PowerPoint?
Well, if you remember that one episode, wasn't there an episode where Oscar had to explain the budget surplus, and they had the big debate about whether they were going to buy a copier or a new chair, and
Hmm.
and Michael was going, explain it to me like I don't know anything. And so if Michael never had Oscar, I don't know if he'd do even worse. But I can empathize with Michael. I'm that type of boss, if I want to even use that term. I like people to like me, and I want to be enjoyed, and I don't want to make anybody mad. And so I that struggle is very real. But
Hmm.
yeah, the guy had no sense of financial wherewithal whatsoever. And if it wasn't for the accountants, he would have been truly lost.
Do I need to be liked? Absolutely not. I like to be liked. I enjoy being liked. I have to be liked. But it's not like this compulsive need to be liked, like my need to be praised.
And I think that happens in real life sometimes too, right? Like we, especially at maybe a smaller organization or a place where certain skills are valued over others, So you're a really good salesperson and you work through that department and then you wind up being COO or CEO or something like that. But yes, if you spend all your career in kind of one side of the house, you know how to do that really well, but you may not always see the big picture. And so that is the point of having good people on your team, right? If you just because you're the boss doesn't mean you need to know everything. You need to know how to pick people who know the things you don't know, right? So that way you don't need to be the subject matter expert in finance and technology and sales and marketing. You need to be able to think at a strategic level and say, oh, I'm going to put this person here as my CFO. I'm going to put this person here as my COO. I'm going to put this person as my technology officer. And so really, that's what it comes down to. I do have that personality too. I like to be liked. And it can be a challenge to be in leadership when you like to be liked, because unfortunately, as we probably all know, sometimes leaders have to make tough decisions, right? Sometimes it's you have to do things that aren't popular. So I do think it's about having the right people around you and knowing, where your blind spots or weak spots are so that you can put the right team in place. And then the trust with those people that if the accountant comes and says, look, I know this sounds like a really great idea, but we can't afford this right now. You trust them enough to say, okay, I believe you. I trust you. Let's pivot and do something different.
You have to remember that Michael didn't only have the accountants in the office, but he had David Wallace. And so I don't think Dunder Mifflin would have gone completely down because they had David Wallace. But one of the side stories in those seasons that I think is hilarious is David was always kind of that buttoned up guy. He wasn't a total nerd, but he knew his numbers and he was a good piece of management. But remember when he left, he kind of went off the deep end. And remember, they go to his house and he's there playing drums with his kid and he invented the suck it and all that kind of stuff. And it just makes you wonder, after so many years of living that CFO life, sometimes you just have to let your hair down and relax a little bit.
But this is
Oh,
also the brilliance of these TV shows too, is they're taking what we some of us can see as the reality and totally turning it on its head, and that's where all the humor comes from. Like I will always remember the episode where they were doing the Secret Santa gifts, and he brings in an iPad or iPod, and someone else throws in an oven mitt, and he's like, "I spent so much money on that," and everyone's like, "Yeah, but we weren't supposed to spend that much." So it'll trickle down even to those little decisions too, where it's like, okay, you should have followed what was on the plan. And he's like, who wants the oven mitt? And someone's like, I got the iPod. I'm going with this.
All right. So if we're comparing fiction and reality in The Office, what would you say is the reality of The Office versus the fictional elements that they have in the show?
I think the biggest reality is just the concept of people getting along in the office. We've all been in those situations and we have all dealt with. I mean, I remember the years that the comment was every office has a Dwight, and if you don't know who the Dwight is, it's you. But everybody's going to deal with their teammates and their coworkers, and they seem to really kind of nail down the different, not necessarily stereotypes, but just the different types of people that are in an office. And that was the thing I think that I gleaned out of The Office that was more reality than fiction.
yeah. My
It,
grandmother used to say it takes all kinds to make the world go round. And you will never see that more on display, I think, than when you enter the workforce, because especially even if you're in the same field, you think, oh, people are going to be similar. And it's just not true. In many ways, I don't fit the stereotype of what people think an accountant or a CPA is, in many ways, right? And so personality wise being a big part of it. I am much more of a bigger, gregarious personality, right? I'm a people person, I'm all of those things. And so people are multifaceted and we do bring ourselves to work, right? We don't just come in, go to your cubicle or your office, do your job. We're interacting, we're having a human
Hmm.
experience with each other. And I would say, yeah, beyond, obviously it's a show, so they have to make things kind of like a little silly, a little ridiculous, right, to get the laughs. But the fundamental part is exactly what Jeff said, personalities and learning to navigate around people and all of that and just, valuing each other for what we bring.
hmm I
Well,
think that's
good.
what makes the show The Office so special is because they not only show that all of these people are going into work, but more so they focus on the dynamics and the relationships that they have with each other. It shows how these people that you would see in real life as just people working in like cubicles and corporate, but like not only that, but they're also real human beings who are interacting with one another and they have their own lives and their own personalities that they bring to the table. And that also is affecting how they're working in a workplace and in a day-to-day life.
The other thing that kind of cracks me up about The Office coming from public accounting is I would watch this and after having to account for every 15-minute increment of my business life for the last 30 plus years, I watched these people in an office setting going, they're not working. That must be really nice. Just kind of sit there and not have to put down admin time or bill it to a client or have to worry about billing. That must be the best way to be an accountant.
Yeah. A lot
I
of
think that.
lollygagging.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying there was a lot of lollygagging happening.
Yeah, I think that's part of definitely something when I was younger, first getting into the working world, going, on TV, they never show you all the really mundane parts of the day or the part where you actually have to fill out a timesheet or waiting for coffee, like all these things that happen that are part of just the working world, that are less glamorous and are easy to say, well, we don't need to fit that into the half-hour time window we have for these episodes. And a lot of the time, I think that's part of the balance of the entertainment world is like we have to make it relatable so that people will like what we're doing, so people will like the show or the movie. But how do we exaggerate it enough to give it that entertainment value? Because it is also supposed to be kind of an escape, right, from the details of the day to day. And so there's a couple like there's a lot of considerations that have to be taken for when you're trying to portray these things, and then that's, I think, where they have to work in tandem with, well, here's what our budget is, right? So you have all these moving parts that always have to be kind of like working in concert with each other. And I think it's easy to not think that there was an accountant involved in saying, well, this is how much you have for this episode, so let's make this work somehow. But that has led to a lot of very innovative approaches to TV shows and movies throughout history, especially things like there was an X-Files episode that they did in the style of Cops. So it was just one or two cameramen instead of a whole crew for that whole episode. And they talked about like we did that kind of for budget reasons, but also because we were following Cops that season time slot wise. So we wanted to just adopt their format. But that was kind of a creative approach to problem solving, which I think a lot of accounting is most of the time, like the way media is as well.
All right, I did want to say that as we've been talking about the accounting profession, I wanted to bring up my experience interning in the accounting profession. I heard a lot of people wanting to have their own superhero show and wanting to have just that specific kind of vibe to it. So if you guys were to have a show that would resonate with you, and as your role or anything, if you would have any show that would resonate with you, what would it be specifically?
Is that relating to the accounting part of it or just in general?
It can relate to accounting, but in any show in general, if there is one, what would it be?
For me, it's a movie. So The Accountant. Now, minus the assassin stuff, because not. But and it's interesting because I'm at a place in my career where I'm shifting, and so I'm really wanting to move into forensic accounting, which is essentially what we see him doing. I don't think he calls it that, but when he gets called into that company and he's figuring out and digging through the books, that's what forensic accounting is. You're trying to figure out something seems off, something's maybe not quite right. And let me dig in a little bit deeper than just saying, do the debits and credits balance? Right? And so that watching that, I think that was probably the coolest also example of someone in the accounting profession that I've ever seen on the screen. Now, like I said, they also made him an assassin, so maybe a step too far. We we don't generally do that. But it really gave a different perspective, because what we're used to seeing on the screen when accountants are portrayed, which is not often, is again a very rigid sort of stereotype of nerdy person, pocket protector with the thick glasses type thing, which is most of the people that I know that are in the profession do not fit that mold. And so it was really cool to see that on screen. And even though that was not the cool part of the movie to a lot of people, it was probably one of the cooler parts to me, because that's what I want to do. I want to be the person who finds the things and does the things. That's how they got Al Capone, right? They got him for tax evasion. They couldn't get him on all the other bad stuff he was doing, and there was plenty, but they could prove that he wasn't paying taxes. And so that to me has always just been a really interesting field, and the ways that it again permeates society.
Well, that's a great transition, because what I was going to bring up was the Untouchables from the '80s, and you were talking about the accountant and the coolness of what he was doing, and I'm going to go to the accountant in that movie who was part of Elliot Ness's gang, and the thing that I always enjoyed about that role and that character was he wasn't nerdy, but he wasn't a cop. And so this was back in Chicago, back when, you just kind of beat people up for no good reason. And you're dealing with gangsters. And when he came into the group, they didn't bring him in. They didn't really welcome him right away. But he started doing, and they were like, why is this guy here? And he's like, this guy hasn't paid taxes in years. This is how we're going to get him.
Mr. Ness?
Yes.
Oscar Wallace.
Uh-huh.
I've been assigned here by the Washington Bureau.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I'm glad to have you here, Mr. Wallace. Excuse me. We are a little in the dark here, but any ideas you may have.
Well, actually, yes, sir, I do. And the one that I want to try first is this. He has not filed a return since 1926.
A return.
An income tax return.
Income tax.
Yes, sir.
What do you do at the Bureau, Mr. Wallace?
Oh, I'm an accountant.
An accountant?
Yes, sir, and the Bureau has sent me here.
Would you excuse me? Please.
And then I love the scenes where they throw a gun in his hands and he's got to use a gun, or he's got to ride the horse across the field, and then there's the one scene where he's in a gunfight and it blows a hole in the whiskey barrel, and he puts his face over and grabs a sip of the whiskey. But again, just like you were saying, it's a situation where this accountant was playing a role and he wasn't the nerd, and he really was part of the solution in that movie.
Yeah, that's like that's I think that kind of sets the stage for the rest of the future portrayals of those kinds of criminal organizations, saying, yeah, we have to worry about this now. You know what I mean? Like especially I think of in Breaking Bad when Saul had to explain to them, like, okay, now we got to figure out how to wash the money. All these things, like, you made the money, now how are you going to pay the taxes on the money? And while I may not be able to come up with a lot of shows that being a media person would somehow be the superpower, I definitely think there are the shows that show the normal person put into the extraordinary situation and then having to adapt to it. And I think Breaking Bad's kind of an interesting exploration. We can't seem to get away from people doing bad stuff, and that's the extreme. But I loved that particular episode where he's like, okay, well, we could take this salon and you're gonna mix your money with the money the salon's making, and by the time it gets to the government, no one knows where your money came from, and you've just laundered it.
If you want to keep your money and your freedom, because I got 3 little letters for you, IRS. If they can get Capone, they can get you. He said, oh, who's this? It's the tax man. And he's looking at you. Now, what does he see? He sees a young fella with a big fancy house, unlimited cash supply, and no job. Now, what is the conclusion the tax man makes?
I'm a drug dealer.
Wrong. Million times worse. You're a tax cheat. What do? They take every penny and you go in the can for felony tax evasion. Ouch! What was your mistake? You didn't launder your money.
So you want me to buy this place so I can pay taxes?
And it's like it's a whole process that I think at home I'm sitting there going, did they just teach us how to do that? I mean, like that's kind of something I feel like the public's not really supposed to understand how it works, but it's part of the world of crime, and we find that it's something that happens not only in the crime world, but there's often fraud happening at governmental levels and municipalities, all kinds of corporate fraud over the years that have become such a big deal. So the idea that's kind of a superpower in itself, being able to say something doesn't add up here, and then you just look through a few of the records, be like, well, where's that, and what did that, and why are they both winding up in this account, and who controls that account? And the next thing you know, people are appearing in court and having to explain themselves, and so there's a lot of heroism hidden in the numbers, and I think the people who can understand the numbers are in a good position to kind of take on that mantle at times.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend who I used to hire as a cameraman all the time who said one of the things that makes me I think is hilarious about like movies about alien invasions is like, well, who financed that operation? In Independence Day, it's like, how much did this fleet cost? Is there anybody like that has the books on this? He goes, that's why that'll never happen. I'm like, are we gonna go do that? You know how much that would cost to do? I was like, okay, I guess I could stop worrying about being invaded by aliens then. So there's another way the accountants could come into play.
Thank you all so much. Oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say it is really interesting when you think about it, Dave, because you brought up a good point. Like we were talking about all these legitimate things, of course, because we are not criminals. But at the end of the day, like not for nothing, if you are a crime boss, you also need an accountant because don't be a crime boss. Not advocating for that.
Disclaimer.
Do not do crimes, okay? But it's because at the end of the day, we speak that language, right? We are the ones with the expertise to tell you how to not get in trouble. And we want to tell you how to not get in trouble when you're doing the right thing and you don't want to accidentally get in trouble. But if you're doing bad things, like those people like that we were talking about, they also pay someone to be able to get out of trouble. And so it is really interesting how the profession and the field really does, again, it touches everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, the money does not care who is in control of it. The money is the thing that is the universal. I mean, I think there's like an entire segment of The Godfather where they're saying, look, if we don't start diversifying our businesses, we're going to be pushed out. These guys are all going in this direction, and the things we've been doing are starting to lose money. So we're going to have to shift gears here. I mean, they did it a lot more colorfully than I was just doing it, but that's kind of, they're taking a legitimate business approach to something that is on the other side of the law, but it's still the same principle of like, this is where the money's flowing. We got to figure this out.
It's funny that you all brought up the idea of crime and accounting and all of that stuff, because I was actually planning to have us switch gears from Scranton in The Office to 1930s Chicago with the Untouchables, like Jeff and Armadra previously mentioned. So let's keep with this conversation and move on to that. So in real life, governments, companies, and even celebrities, they can hide behind lawyers and PR teams. But money always leaves a footprint, as we know. Like you all have been saying, accountants are the ones who can track that down and help people be accountable to that. So my question regarding the Untouchables for you guys is, How do accountants support legal and ethical accountability in that show?
Well, besides being the key to bringing the villain down altogether, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of the central linchpin in that whole thing. I think it opened the law enforcement's eyes to that being an avenue to take in the first place. You know, when
Mm-hmm.
Elliot Ness is dead set on it being this big, boisterous, we're going to go in there and we're going to catch them red-handed and we're going to, yeah, and because of that, he was able to be foiled almost very embarrassingly at the beginning of the movie. And even he didn't understand the value of the accountant being there until he said, look, we could put him away for multiple decades. You know what I mean? If he can't prove where his finances are here, we got him. And so I think, and that trend then became something that was used in every, from The Sopranos to Breaking Bad to even Mr. Robot. There's always someone who's bringing up, I have to go talk to my accountant. We got to figure this out. So I think that may have laid the foundation for accountants becoming almost like another arm of law enforcement. Not even almost there. I mean, we have FBI agents who are accountants today who say, this is the exciting day. We get to go arrest somebody.
I think you're dead on, Dave. In that movie, when that character comes in, you're right. Elliot Ness, Kevin Costner was kind of like, why is this guy joining? I mean, he had no clue that they could get Capone this way, and it was that character that actually brought it to light. And just the way you explained it, I mean, he was like, "You're not even thinking about this," and he had this master plan to get him doing these other things, and it really wasn't even on Elliot Ness's radar.
Yeah, and it like I would just echo that. It's a lot of times people who are doing a certain thing, right? So you're talking about like Breaking Bad. They're really good at concealing that thing, right? They're not, well, 1930 Chicago probably was a little bit different. It was kind of like the Wild Wild West. But Capone was not the one getting his hands dirty 9 times out of 10. Right. And the loyalty of the people in his organization, they weren't going to tell. Plus, they were afraid for their lives, but they weren't going to tell on him.
What is this?
Nothing. It's nothing
It's
you can
nothing?
make out of it.
What is this?
If we can establish that any of these coded entries indicate payment to Capone, then we can put Capone away.
I want you to tell us which one of these entries is Al Capone.
It's A. Costa. Is that your code name for Capone?
You're going to do the whole thing in the joint unless you help us here, pal.
I want you to translate this ledger for us.
In hell.
So if you want to bring down the big boss, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have to think outside the box. And it did. I think it opened people's eyes. That is the first that I can recall seeing a portrayal of an accountant or something like that in a movie, certainly in a way that was a major part. Like maybe they were a little side character and it was like, oh, that's Bill the accountant, and you saw him one time for 5 minutes. But he was a main character. He was an important character. And he earned their respect through his tenacity and his willingness to work. And so I think it helped shift too the conversation around the value that we can bring. It's not just, oh, they check the boxes and they do the things. It's like, no, we can actually play an active role in taking down a crime boss or discovering a fraud that's happening at an organization. And conversely, if your auditors or your accountants are complicit in it, then they can face major consequences. The reason I have the career that I've had for most of it is based on Enron, and all the financial frauds and things that took place. That generated a whole new sort of concept of internal controls are really important, and here's why. And it all just goes to how things change and develop, throughout time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because especially with the Untouchables, but even in further examples down the road, who is one of the most valuable witnesses that the law enforcement people can capture and protect is the bookkeeper who is doing all of the doctoring of the finances. I mean, that whole train sequence at the end of Untouchables, which anyone out there listening, if you haven't seen this, please, it's on, I think, it's on Prime right now.
Mm-hmm.
But they are trying to get the bookkeeper out of the city so that Elliot Ness and his team can't get him to testify. It became this whole. They're important on both sides. On every side, everyone's like, the person who knows where my money is the most important person in my organization. And I think conversely, we have a whole at the center, we have a whole campaign going called the Agents of Transformation. And a lot of accountants' stories started with, well, I was interested in joining the FBI, or there was something about law enforcement that pulled me in, and that was an avenue in. In the Untouchables, that accountant didn't think he would be a law enforcement agent to the level that they brought him to, until Sean Connery says, if you carry a badge, you carry a gun. And then it became this whole next level. And I think that there are plenty of people out there who might still see that as something they were interested in, and accounting could be a pathway in for them. So it's interesting because, again, we're talking about what now is referred to as kind of a sin industry, right? Like all these bad things that happen that are portrayed on TV and they're very entertaining, but there's a reality there. And if you want to be a superhero, you want to be a FBI agent, and you're great with numbers and you can follow the patterns, you might be able to get there by being an accountant.
Mhm.
One of the things that was interesting about that show was the way they differentiated the two different accounting people, because you brought up the bookkeeper for Capone, and that character was completely different. He was kind of a weasel, if you remember.
Yeah.
He didn't really have much of a spine, not like the FBI guy, but I never really thought about it before until this discussion. But yeah, they portrayed both of those in two different lights completely.
So I was saying that what I've been hearing from all of you today is that most of the accountants are kind of a secret superhero in a way. They are, in the behind the scenes, forget capes. I mean, give the guy an Excel spreadsheet or a calculator or something, and he'll save the day. So I did want to ask that how do you think money can uncover bigger truths in movies like The Untouchables and also in real life? How does that translate in real life as well?
Asking the deep, tough questions today.
Well, they do always say follow the money, right?
I was gonna say, yeah, that's what came to my mind immediately was follow the money. A lot of times, and I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head, and I can see 70,000 movie scenes in my mind and can't think of, one good one, but that happens a lot. It's like, okay, we know this person is doing something, but follow the money, right? If if somebody's conspiring, let's say you hear about a murder for hire or something like that. Well, for hire, i.e., there is money. So I may not, you may not have met in a place where we could record you. You may not do that, but I see that $50,000 transfer from your bank account into Mr. Killer's bank account. Oh, there's this. Or it sets up the connection, right, between two people. And even on the good side of things, right? The money tells a story about what's going on in the relationship that people may have. I mean, people don't hardly write checks anymore, but it used to be a time, oh, you wrote a check to this person for this, or again, we see this bank transfer for this. You told me you didn't even know them, but why were you sending them $2,000 then? And that's the way also that frauds have been uncovered is, somebody's like diverting funds or something like that. Oh, that's going into your account and it's supposed to be going into someone else's. So I think like the money itself may not always be the thing, the crime or the negative thing, but it tells the story of what that thing is.
I think you always find out the character of a person when they start coming into money. And TV shows and movies tend to do a good show that in a positive way as well. But so I just think it's a matter of what do you like? Your true personality just truly comes out when you are you get in that position. And I think the shows and the movies do a pretty good job of showing when someone goes down a road. And it's hard to come back. Think about with someone with an addiction or a gambling problem, or movies and TV shows usually do they never show someone actually make it back to where they wanted. It's always a matter of how bad it gets. And it's kind of the same thing that people say, I didn't wake up today intending to be a drug addict. I didn't wake up today intending to rob a bank. You just kind of tend to go down a pathway before too long, you've gone too far and you can't get back. So at least the TV shows and the movies are not showing successful people coming back, because most of the time it just doesn't happen that way.
I agree wholeheartedly too with what you said, Jeff, about like money doesn't make you a thing. Like having it doesn't make you a thing. It exposes, I think, a thing. So a person who's generous is generous, whether they have a little bit or a lot. And a person who is stingy, whether they have a little bit or a lot, right? And I'm sure we all could probably think of someone who fits in both of those categories. And the things that we will do for money, right? I mean, especially if you are accustomed to having it. So I'll think about another movie that I love. It's called Fun with Dick and Jane. It's got Jim Carrey and what is her name? Oh, I can
Was
see
it
it.
Elizabeth Banks? Was it Elizabeth Banks
Maybe
in that?
Elizabeth
I think
Banks. Maybe. Either way,
no, it's Taya Leone. Taya Leone.
thank you. Yes, it's
Yeah.
Ted Leone, which it's also hilarious, by the way. But it is kind of based on the whole financial scandals thing. So the Enrons, the WorldComs, the Tycos, right? And so this guy works at a company and then winds up being the fall guy for this big financial scandal. But they go bankrupt, essentially. I know I'm giving the plot away, but still watch it. They go bankrupt, essentially, right? And then embark on all these very dubious actions because they have bills to pay. They have a child to raise. And then they start going, okay, wait, this is going too far, to Jeff's point. That's probably one of the only movies I've seen where you see them kind of turn it around and go, yeah, okay. We, we're going too far. We're going too far. But yeah, it's we set up a life and did a certain thing, and wanted to. We thought we did all the right things. We got the good jobs and we da 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 da. And now all of that gets snatched away. And now what do we do? Right? And we've now turned to a life of crime. And how do we come back from that? Because this is not who we want to be. So it actually has some good lessons in it. It also just happens to be hilarious because it's Jim Carrey. But that's a movie that when I see it, I think, yeah, like that was probably some people's real life experience, right? When those companies went down, the thousands of people who worked there, most of them were not involved in the bad thing that happened.
Right.
They were not intimately involved in the fraud, but they all faced the consequences of it. And like I said, that's why I have the profession I have today, is we're trying to keep that from happening again.
When you're talking about what money can do to people, there's probably no better series that shows that than the Breaking Bad series, when you've got Walter White, and he just wanted to help his family, but the more he acquired, the worse he got. And that carried over into the Better Call Saul series, the prequel, because if you remember, Saul was just trying to make it. But then when he got hooked up with the cartel, it was like, oh, I mean, at the very end, the guy's walking across the desert with a whole bag full of money and he can't give up the money. So yeah, it does bad things to people.
Okay, so I know we're running short on time, but I have got to ask one more question to each of you just for fun. And because of time, let's just make this a really quick question and answer round. So my question is for all of you guys, if you were a career or if your career were a TV show or a movie, what would be your soundtrack?
Like who would be on? What artists would be on the soundtrack?
Anything, any artist, any song specifically, what would be your soundtrack?
50% Prince and 50% Cardi B. That's
That's awesome. That's a tough one to follow.
that tells you a lot about me.
Mine would probably be something like Only the Young from the Vision Quest soundtrack by Journey.
Wow.
Journey's solid. That's solid.
Solid 80s pick. As long as it's not, Don't Stop Believing.
Nice. Yeah. I would probably have Hans Zimmer do like a lot of really kind of intense and then thoughtful, like back and forth. 'Cause something like that you would hear in like The Dark Knight or the Christopher Nolan movies, like especially Tenet had a really good soundtrack. And Heat too, but that was Jerry Goldsmith. But something like that, the kind of thing where you're just like, whoa, people are deep in thought. There's a lot of plotting going on, and people are being perfectionist about everything. That would be, I think that would be the backdrop of what I would hear all the time.
I like that.
As for me, I don't know. I don't know if this would fit with my personality, but my career, I would say the soundtrack from the Spider-Verse movies, because those are one of my favorite movies from all time. Miles Morales is like one of my favorite characters of all time. So just his personality in general and everything. So I would say I would pick that as my personal soundtrack.
I like that.
Nice.
Mhm.
Nice. Good range at the table here.
Yes, we got all personalities. We go from 80s to Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been such a fun conversation. I've really enjoyed talking to all of you guys and all of your guys' personalities. And in this episode, from Scranton to Capone, and even personal soundtracks, we've seen how pop culture proves that accounting professionals aren't just number crunchers, they can be leaders and problem solvers behind the scenes. Not to mention, as you have shown, they can also be pretty in tune with pop culture. So, thank you so much for joining me in today's episode of Student Led Conversations. This has been such a great conversation. Sadly, we've come to an end of our time together, and I want to thank everyone one last time for tuning in to today's episode of Student Led Conversations, and a special thank you to Jeff, Armandra, and Dave for joining us today. I really loved our conversation and everything we talked about. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe and follow Student Led Conversations. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making an impact. See you next time.
Student-Led Conversations is brought to you by the Center for Accounting Transformation, empowering the next generation of leaders through student-focused programs that build confidence, leadership, and real-world connection. The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. If you're a student, discover how you can lead, learn, and grow in the profession. If you're a professional, explore ways to give back, mentor, or sponsor student-driven initiatives. To learn more, please visit our website, www.we.improvetheworld.net, and unlock the power of the accounting profession.